Welcome everyone, welcome to our virtual event. You can see there, Mining in a Greener World. This is a series of a number of virtual panel discussions that we've had over the last today and yesterday, really around the broad theme of can mining make the world a greener place? And for those of you who have joined us in some of those panel discussions, fantastic, thank you. And for those of you who are new to this, this is a special climax event. Really, welcome to you too. I should introduce myself. I'm Iain Stewart. I'm Professor of Geoscience Communication down at the University of Plymouth in the UK, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. And as I said, as I mentioned, this particular event is really trying to pull together a lot of the different threads that we've been exploring over the last few days around this notion of of sustainability in mining, whether that's an oxymoron, what are the challenges, etc. And so we're going to try to kind of have this as a culmination, really, of what we've been talking about. But first, to set the scene a little bit, let me offer a provocation. Let me paint you a picture. And that picture was put out by Morten Smelrer, who was director of the Geological Survey of Norway. He's retired now. And he did it in 2018 at the Resourcing Future Generations Conference in Vancouver. He says, by 2058, the Green Stone Age is established, and we will use all elements in the periodic system and more rare minerals to support new materials and technological solutions. The major energy suppliers will be CO2-free. The agriculture will be more efficient. Distribution and consumption of food will be more rational. And we will harvest more marine food chains than today. More than 70% of the people on Earth will live in megacities and urban areas. Our cities will become smarter and greener. Cars and public transport will be self-driving, and autonomous tools using artificial intelligence to automate functions previously performed by humans. Substantial resources will be used to repair damaged ecosystems, and most important, we will use materials and products that have far fewer negative consequences for the environment. So what I'd like to do in this session today is to introduce and to bring on some people to take us through this, to really put that through the grill, really have to question some of the assumptions there and see to what extent that particular scenario is valid. So what I'd like to bring on Karen Hanghoy, who is director of the British Geological Survey, and before that was formerly at ETI Raw Minerals. And Ortwin Wren, who is scientific director at the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies, professor of environmental sociology and technology assessment at the University of Stuttgart. Aminata Kamara, who is the community engagement specialist and also director of Sazani Sierra Leone. And last but not least, Adrian Glover, who's a researcher, Deep Sea Research Group there in the Natural History Museum. So welcome, everyone. You have the dubious honor, really, of trying to wrap up and simplify several days of discussions. And I don't think there were any arguments, but certainly different perspectives on a really contested and controversial and complex topic. I think I'd like to go around just initially getting your sense of to what extent you feel you see Morten's vision there, you agree with it, or whether you would push back against something. Karen, can I start with you? How do you take on Morten's view?
I think that Morten's vision there is really sort of in other flavors. It's very consistent with the agendas all over the world. It's very consistent with Sustainable Development Goals, the European Green Deal, lots of national and regional initiatives. So I think that it's absolutely, for sure, the direction of travel. What I do think is that it sounds really great, and it's really easy to be for it.
Kind of utopian, really, isn't it?
You're going to create this really, really great world. So I think what I would like to sort of bring in here is a little bit, I'm very passionate about the really important question is, how do we actually get there? Because it's not going to be simple to do these things and to get there. And so I think that while it's a beautiful thing to be moving towards, getting there is going to be really difficult, and it will take the change of some of the ways that we think about our resources.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair to Morten, I think that he was his paper did talk about exactly some of those things, and we'll definitely explore that. Ortwin, what's your take?
Well, I think at the outset, I would like to say that we will strive, just like Morten has said, for a zero fossil society. We would like to have a decarbonized society, but it is just not imaginable that we have a demineralized society or a society without metals. And I think that's a main point that I would like to make in the beginning. It is very good for a green economy in the future to be sure that we get rid of some of the materials that we've used in the past. And fossil fuels is also something that we have mined in the past, and that is something that should be in the past and not be taken up for the future. But we do need metals, and we do need minerals, and there's no way that an economy can strive and even, good the basic needs being accomplished without metals and without minerals. So the question is not, do we need mining? The question is, how can we operate mining in a way that it is in line with what Morten just pointed out? I mean, a green, sustainable economy. And clear it will not be 100% sustainable. We should be very honest about this. But we can do much better than we have done in the past. And if you get to some of these suggestions during this round here, I would be really glad also to contribute to that.
Great. I mean, we'll definitely be picking up on some of those thorny issues, really. I mean, Atta, that 2058 Green Stone Age, does that describe what you might think of seeing in Sierra Leone or in Africa, where many of our resources come from? I mean, Atta, what's your view on that kind of vision?
Just as Karen earlier said, it's a welcome idea. And also, and the second speaker and also mentioned that we cannot do without mining. But the model of Martin, the vision of Martin, looks like a dream. It's even beyond a dream when you consider what is happening in Africa. It is beyond, it's something that we cannot even imagine because we are far away from what is happening in developed countries. We see mining, the economy depends on agriculture, it depends on mining. When we talk about the revenue, because most of the majority, over 75 to 80% are farmers. But the government also depends on mining a lot, but it is not reflected. And we see potholes, we see a lot of devastation and environmental degradation in mining communities. The environment has not been able to recoup itself. And even you talk about the iron ore mining in Lone Star, it was abandoned in 1996 and revived again in the 90s, and it came up again in 2012, 2013, still doing exploration, and London Mining was doing something else. But you go to the communities, there's nothing to show for it, and even the tailings that were deposited are still there. Those that the Delco Mining left, the tailings are still there. The communities cannot use those areas for farming at the moment. Not to talk about other areas like even the Terra Rutile mining. All the tailings, the sand tailings. There was a time the company has its community development action plan, and they tried to reclaim some of those areas, but less than 1% of what was destroyed has been regained. And if you go to those communities, I wonder how long, if we have not been able to reclaim even 5% of what has been destroyed since the 1930s, how are we going to reclaim and make our community greener? You come again even to the locals, there is artisanal mining all over the place. Our beaches are being destroyed. We have fantastic beaches, but you go to Ogu Farm, you go to Laka Beach in the western area, you find out that some of the areas, some of the houses have been sunk. Yes, the houses, due to sand mining. It is not even a company from Europe or America, Australia. The locals, because the communities are poor, they depend on sand mining. And the people in Sierra Leone depend on sand, the aggregates to do concrete building, well-structured buildings. You go to the hills also, the same, aggregates.
Well, no, I was just thinking
it's really difficult.
Yeah. I think we'll follow up some of these points, because I think
you talk about
we'll tackle these things, because I think that that aspects. I mean, these are aspects of equity. Justice. No, it's fine. It's fine. I think I could see the other panelists nodding as well, and I think that I think underpins some of the challenges that people have been alluding to. So we'll pick those up. But first, I'd like to go to Adrian. I mean, you're in the deep sea marine.
Sorry. Okay.
No, I'll just go into Adrian, because that's another area that isn't really addressed in Morton's kind of vision about what the oceans are, where the frontiers might be. I mean, what's your take on it, Adrian?
Well, thank you, Ian, and that's fascinating, Aminata, to hear that. I'm struck by, to some degree, my own sort of circumstances here as a biodiversity scientist 15 years ago, working on the deep oceans in the Central Pacific. I hadn't really come into action with mining or mineral extraction, and suddenly it came knocking at our door, and we were confronted with the question of, can environmental sound, sustainable practices be compatible with a mining extraction industry, and one where not very many people live. But it was a huge question, and certainly our instinct at the beginning was, well, no, that doesn't sound very good. And but I've sort of been on a bit of a personal journey since then. I've sat in various panels and stakeholder groups that involve not just the pure biodiversity science that's involved in these fundamental questions, but the human side, the social side, the economic side, the legal side, everything. For example, in this case of marine mineral mining, you're looking at potentially small island developing states in the Pacific Ocean that could potentially have an entirely new economy to resource themselves when they are in extremely dire financial need. So there's all kinds of sides to the argument, and it's just fascinating to be here and hear this. I think, to go back to your question, Ian, I think that the plan that you've envisaged, that's plan A, isn't it, really? And I don't know what plan B is. I'm not certain that there is one that's actually acceptable. And it seems to me, I think the chief executive of a very famous motor company called Tesla, his name escapes me, let's not, said something like that they need to mine more nickel than there's ever been mined before in order to build this future that we've all decided we're going down. So we're all part of it now. And I think that is plan A. I don't know what plan B is. And biodiversity scientists like myself, we are learning to adapt with that and live with it and think carefully in the broader context of what we do and how we preserve biodiversity and maintain ecosystems. And it's something we want to engage with. And I found it's a positive experience so far. I can see that many examples of mining in the past probably haven't been. But maybe we can talk more about that later, and how there are positive ways of moving forward in these areas. So. Yeah,
and I'm sure the ecological, environmental aspects will kind of come through. So on that point, actually, there's a chat, folks, and people, if you want to put some questions into the chat, we've got some people behind the scenes that are try and answer them or put them through to us. I know some people are on YouTube, some people are coming in from Twitter and various Instagram, etc. So if you can keep those questions coming. But I think Karen alluded, well, I guess everyone alluded to this in one way or another. Maybe the question isn't so much the vision as how do we get there and what the critical challenges are. Karen, you started us out on that. What do you think that pathway looks like, and where are the real hurdles on the road?
Well, I think, what I really like about that vision is actually he calls it the Stone Age, because and it's what sort of Ortwin was also articulating very elegantly, that it's very, very important that we understand that in order to pretty much have the energy transition, which is going to drive this vision, we will actually need to use some other resources than the ones that we want to get, the ones that we want to stop using. And I think that is there's an understanding of that in some groups of society, but not widely. And I think actually that's probably the biggest hurdle, that people have this idea that they can, we'll smack a green circle onto something, or we'll use the word sustainable a lot, and then everyone can sort of get behind it and be supportive of it. And so this sort of realization of what it actually means. And I think Aminata mentioned farming, and I think actually that is, it's always very good to go back to farming, because we all understand that and we all accept farming. And I come from a country, I come from Denmark, where farming sort of historically has been a very large sector and a very important sector. And it has been the biggest environmental challenge for Denmark as well. It's been the sector that's probably had the biggest environmental impact negatively in sort of historical times. But somehow we have not necessarily accepted it, but we've learned to navigate it. We have found ways of mitigating. We have found standards that we're applying because we understand that we need to balance our need for milk and butter and other things that we want from farming. We need to balance that with the environmental impact that it has, and we have to find an acceptable level. And any kind of exploitation that we do is an ugly word, but it is what we do. Any kind of resource exploitation comes with environmental impact. And so the real key is to find out how we minimize that environmental impact so that it becomes acceptable to us relative to the benefits that it actually gives for us. But to be able to have that conversation, we need to be brutally honest. And I think that we've been, for decades or even maybe centuries, things like mining has been things we didn't want to talk about. It's been taboo. It's been pretty much, in my, I think, understanding, for many mining companies, their communication strategy traditionally, historically, has been stay out of the news. Just, lie low, stay under the radar, because any news is bad news. And we need to stop that. We need to go out there and tell the world why we need to think differently.
Do you sense, and I'll maybe after you've responded, bring in Ortwin here, do you sense that's a first world taboo? Is that a cultural change that's happened in Europe and in the US, North America and Australasia? Or do you think it's global issue?
I think it's a global issue, but I think it might be perceived and received quite differently in different areas. Because again, as Aidan was pointing out, there are areas where could be a stepping stone to income and to wealth. But that is also why it's so important that we really get into the conversation about what is sustainable and what is good and what can we accept, because we do need these resources and we do need to get to them where they are, but we need to make sure that people don't make bad decisions because they're too hungry.
That's great. I mean, Ortwin, bringing in that environmental sociology background there. I mean, what do you think about? It sounds like from what Karen said, it's almost a cultural mindset change is going to be needed, certainly in many countries, particularly Europe, for example, to bring this new green Stone Age into being. Do you agree with that? Is that the way you see it?
Well, I think, we always have to think about socio-technological systems, meaning that any technology like mining is embedded in a social environment. And I think in the past, and I would really agree there with Karen, the mining industry was not very sensitive to the needs of people around them. They were giving work and that was it. And then they were also not very sensitive to landscape changes, and they were not very sensitive very often to the waste that they had produced. And since they had such a kind of a bad reputation, then over the last maybe 2 or 3 decades, they didn't take much effort to change this, because they said, well, it doesn't work, because whatever we do, we get a bad reputation. So we are used to be bad. And of course, that doesn't make change happening. And that, I think, is a real issue. I think we first have actually to start with the mining industry itself and say, look, guys, you have a very bad reputation. For one thing, that's actually justified, but on the other side, you really provide service to society. And we help you, that people understand that you provide service to society, but you help to take your part of it. And that is, think about your waste, think about your land use, think about the energy that you use, all the kinds of issues that are important for having a green future. And if you are part of a group that actually promotes this and be, a front runner in this, that's the best way to communicate that we need your service. And I think we have to start from the exploration side. I mean, I'm representing here the InFact group that looks into new exploration methods that are not pervasive, so that you can go from the outside, from helicopters, to do all of these things. It doesn't have any negative impact on the landscape. You're not rushing through a lot of different ecosystems. So that's the first start. I mean, just saying it's the first start. And then it goes on with the way that, how do you recultivate the land later on? What are you doing in order to make sure that once you leave, that things are not looking like the moon afterwards. And all of that is important because these are the images that have a strong impact on people's perception. So we have a lot of these images of kind of moon-like landscape, and people believe, well, if that's what's happening, well, that's not green for us. I mean, it's just so different from what we see. And we have other areas which have been really well recultivated, and then people say, oh, it looks even maybe better than before. And that can happen. You know, we can have wonderful lakes in there. You can also include, you know, new vegetation and so on. It does cost money, that's clear. I mean, the green future is not cheap. But given that that is our future, I think we should have the time and also the resources to invest in this. And then I think it could be a co-evolution of public reputation saying, oh, these guys are not as bad as I thought. And at the same time, well, we do need these services. And then I think it could have a major change. But I think both sides need to do a lot in order to make this happen.
I'd like to explore a little bit with Aminata the social impact, the consequences, before going on to the environmental with Adrian. Aminata, I mean, I've been to Sierra Leone, I've been to those artisanal diamond mines, and it seems to me that mining is, Ortwin talked about being socially embedded. There's a very different culture around mining in places like Sierra Leone in Africa. Tell me about that culture. To what extent is mining, how does it fit into the societal realm?
Mining is very important, both in the formal and the informal sector. We have legal miners, we have illicit miners as well. And a lot of people depend on mining after agriculture, mining. And the kind of mining we do in Sierra Leone, I mean, the kind of farming is not the mechanized type of farming. So that one also has an impact, just as the earlier speakers highlighted. The slash and burn, you know, the rotational bush fallow, period. These all have effects on the environment. But mining also, I know mining, so it provides income for the locals, it provides employment, it provides income for the government, but the consequences after mining are really very great. There is influx, and at the end of mining, communities seem to be left more deprived, more sorrowful than they were. And of course, we have the IFC, International Finance Corporation, operating standards. When companies go to those areas, they should not leave the people worse off than they are. And they do environmental impact assessments. Community action plans are prepared, and livelihood restoration plans are prepared. But it's about following them. And when you go to mining areas, and there are illicit miners, you have the formal, those who report to the company. But you find out that even areas where you have formal mining, the communities are not so improved. You know, you talk about employment, and the mining companies cannot employ everybody. And as soon as mining companies go into those areas, people seem to abandon their own livelihoods. Maybe they are fishing, they are farming, and they all want to be employed. And most of the time, they are not even qualified for those jobs because the illiteracy rate is very high in our country. So the problems keep mounting. And when it comes to surface rent, because it is divided, that is the landowners, those who own land are paid an annual rent, and they also pay crop compensation. And the annual surface rent normally brings conflict also among families because it is small. In some areas, it's just like, you know, $10. In other areas, $5. I think Hutan pays the highest, maybe $15, $20. The last time I was there, it was something like $10 per acre. But I understand it has been reviewed over the years. But I a new company just came up into the northern part of the country, Cambia District. It was launched last month, and I'm in one of I'm in the forum, Cambia Forum, and there were complaints that people, the landowners were paid $3 per acre to mine their area. Can you imagine? And these are farmers, $3 for 1 acre. What about the mango trees that are there, the oranges, all the plants? The company comes and removes those. And they talk about maybe they will do a community development action plan that they will provide seedlings to replant, to make the environment greener. At the end of the day, it doesn't happen. And most of the time, just as I pointed out earlier, communities seem to depend on the mine and they abandon their areas. So the oranges, all the other trees that were there at the end of the day, they are just compensated for 1 year. They give them lump sum.
That's an interesting point. It's a point that came up. It's a point that came up yesterday about the idea that not only are materials and mineral resources finite, but mining is a finite activity in the life cycle of a community. And I think that's a point I'd like to come back to later on. I'm going to go to Adrian. There's a couple of. I'll frame it maybe around a couple of questions that's coming in around your side of things. So. Pippa Howard's got a statement that says, it's hard for scientists who are funded by industry to collect the scientific data needed for baseline studies for environmental and social impact. And she says, say no to deep sea mining. We'll come back to that bit. But the other one is from Nelson, who says, how do we balance mining activities and biodiversity protection? What are the good practices? So can you put those kind of two together? What are the challenges we've got? And maybe take it from the point of view of a scientist, researchers, to get those baselines in order to know how we move into that greener, sustainable kind of utopia.
Well, the answer, I'm a biodiversity scientist, and biodiversity is absolutely key. There is no question in anyone's mind that the preservation of biodiversity should not be foremost in our environmental concerns. I often tell students, well, let's think of the major pressures on our planet. Climate change is awful, and it will have huge damage. But we can probably survive some amount of climate change. What you can't survive is a wasteland with zero biodiversity in it. That will be the end of humanity, quite simply. So there is no question that biodiversity preservation is absolutely paramount. I mean, in answer to the deep sea mining, that's an interesting angle. Again, you have to think about this from the point of view of which bits of the world do you draw boxes around and protect, and which bits do you throw under a bus? Let's be provocative here. I sometimes ask students, should Antarctica be protected completely and utterly from any activities when we are perfectly okay with driving machines and industry and agriculture and land use change across rainforests and other parts of the world? The simple is that that doesn't sound right, does it? And there's a human element there, which is that humans, and we have to see the benefits of conservation for it to be worthwhile. And I think Antarctica is an interesting example because there are only very few wealthy people get to go there, David Attenborough and the BBC film crews and so on. When what you really want is people to be engaged in that and see the value of that conservation and communication. You have to get the science right, but you have to also get the communication right. You have to communicate the value of biodiversity in a way to everybody, because we're all stakeholders in it. Deep sea mining is just an interesting example of this. There is no deep sea mining going on. There is only biodiversity and environmental survey happening. It's an example of an incredibly positive story where humanity has got together to try to figure out, can this be done economically, legally, and environmentally? And that's the first time ever. It's a remarkable story. And I remain positive about the process. Twice a year, 195 people, diplomats from all representatives of all nations of the world meet to try and figure out, can this be done? We're still a long way off agreeing on it.
And I just wonder on that point, I mean, I don't want, I mean, the marine realm is an interesting one, but it might be a rabbit hole that we descend down and never come back up. But I mean, is it a completely different world, or is it the lessons that we learn from the debate we're having on land and, in the forest, and Pippa Howard referred to in a thing that came up about forest mining. We've got all these complexities that we deal with on land. Is it this kind of the same complexities we deal with in the marine realm or in asteroids? How would you deal
some
with
things
that?
map across quite well, but some things don't. For example, there are no people living in the deep sea at 5,000 meters in the Central Pacific. So you don't have lots of environmental impacts you see in terrestrial mines, whether it's mine tailings and pollution of water systems, or loss of tourism, or loss of agricultural services or ecosystem function in the soil, etc., etc. Those just don't apply because there aren't people living there. You have a whole new problem, which is this concept of humans going into a wilderness area, just as we would if we land. When we take, for example, what's one of the biggest science projects going on right now in our solar system is the idea of sample return from Mars. Who owns that sample? Who's doing the environmental impact assessment on taking that sample from Mars? These are very big, fundamental philosophical questions, and deep sea mining is a sort of test bed for that, really. Can we come up with answers to this as to how everyone has a stake in working in places beyond national jurisdiction? Many of the issues, biodiversity loss and functional loss and things like that, do map across, but it goes very deep. Do we want to preserve areas of wilderness and then really impact other places much more strongly? Or do we want to try and spread that across the planet in some sort of fair way? I don't have the answers, and I'm not the person that will make the decision, but I can tell you about biodiversity in the deep sea, and I'll rant wonderfully about how amazing it is. I can't give you the answer as to whether that was the place that has to take the hit or not.
But no, I think we'll definitely come back to it, because it is one of those frontiers, and it's a big question. But I'd like to stay on dry land a little bit longer. Tove Hageland's got an interesting question in the chat. He's coming from YouTube, which says, "What do you think is the most important to ensure responsible mining worldwide? Is it legislation, traceability, strong international agreement, or another?" And I'll open that up. Anyone who would like to kind of take that?
Well, maybe I start with this one. I think it's a very important issue, and because very often we can see that, well, just put in responsibility in one people's backyard and then saying do it, and then if the person doesn't do it, we have a lot of blame to give. But I think if you want to be really progressing, we need to take all of these people and all of these institutions into a responsible set of complementary duties and missions and issues. What I can see is that first, the mining industry itself needs to think about its own practices, and they can do quite a bit in terms of really doing an ecological survey about what they're doing, environmental impact assessment, all kinds of things. Secondly, we need regulators that really do inspect things. I mean, it's very often, specifically, I think, Amalia, what you're saying about Sierra Leone, I mean, if the inspectors look away or even are corrupt, well, it's very difficult to do something. And so we need very good also regulation, and that regular system should, in the ideal world, be global. I mean, we have the same rules, or almost the same rules, in terms of regulations, because we don't want a free rider coming up and say, okay, we don't have any good regulations, you can come here. And thirdly, I think we need watchdogs like good NGOs that are there, and also look about the social impacts that are running. And I think, again, you, Amali, made a very good point on that. Some people benefit a lot and others don't at all. So we need to see also that happens. And the best thing is if these kind of, the political field, the enterprises, so the commercial and economic field, and the civil society work together. And yes, they have different functions, they have different roles, and they should be critical of each other. But if they work together to say, well, we come up with something that we have defined roles, and we'll watch it out, and we make sure that happens, but we are cooperative. We don't want to blame anyone. We just want to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to do. I think then it will work. And we have good examples in the world where even mining operations have done in a very responsible way, and we've seen them themselves in part of Northern Europe where I've been visiting, and I think that did work well, and we can make sure that kind of practice is done everywhere. And I think that's a real big effort that we need to undertake.
The mining industry, and I'm not saying you are the miners, the mining industry often points to the very positive ones, and that Daisy Birch in the chat there has pointed to one of the more recent negative ones, which is the Rio Tinto destroying the Aboriginal caves in Australia. But so the broader question, I guess, comes from that, and again, Ortwin, just initially, is if you had a global oversight authority, would that help, or would it just be another layer that gets in the way? Is there something more fundamental that's a problem?
Yeah. Well, I think we have seen in the past that this kind of, UN type of oversight doesn't really work. That has a lot of reasons. I don't want to go into it. I think what we need probably is that we get to multilateral agreements. I think that's an important element also, that the customers of these products say, well, if you're not certified, if you're not part of this idea of doing responsible mining, we won't buy your stuff, even if it's cheaper. I mean, that takes a lot of courage to do that. But I think we need these bilateral agreements, and they're bilateral agreements between countries, but also between customers and providers. That helps, because you start out something, it becomes visible, then you get the NGOs coming and say, oh, it works here, why doesn't it work here? And then we get pressure. If you wait for the UN to do all of this, I mean, it's great, and I would love to have this done in parallel, but we should not wait until we have this super regulatory system, which probably will never emerge. But we have to start out, on the local elements, and then try to see who is all invested in this, and get whoever is invested together to really build on this kind of responsible stewardship.
Can I bring Karen on, and then I'll bring Aminata? Karen, that's regulation kind of side of things, the oversight. How do you see it?
I completely agree with Ortwin. I think it's basically all of those things have to come together. I'm actually a big fan also of the traceability, that we are able to and you use the word certify, and that's exactly what it's about. We need to have a certification system where we know where things are coming from and how they have been extracted, and this should actually similarly go for secondary resources, because there's also a lot of environmental issues surrounding extraction from secondary resources, and that will only really work, and that will only really happen if you have the regulations. Because I think when it comes to the users of the metals, we are the end users, but the real users are the ones that are building stuff for us, producing all of the things that we do, and if they are basically sort of from on a legislative level being asked to take responsibility for which products they're using, and also what happens to the products after we get them and how they can perhaps be recycled, that would really be a strong driver for change. And I think actually those industries too have not had that issue. They bought metals off the shelf. It's how it's worked. It gets traded on a daily basis, and they buy it off the shelf, and no one's asking them any questions. And we're starting to ask those questions, and we need to accelerate that. So I completely agree with what Ortwin said about all of these things need to come together and work actually sort of in unison globally before we can make some real progress on this.
Can I bring Aminata in from that the African perspective in terms of the other side of the resource equation, really? How that you've already mentioned the problems of oversight and traceability, but can you say a little bit more? By 2058, do you think you could see a situation where you've got really rigorous regulation, robust regulation there, or will that have another detrimental effect on the social impact?
I hope. It looks unrealistic at the moment, but nothing is impossible. And I hope the generation to come will be able to realize that, because biodiversity is very important. We need to keep a balance in the ecosystem. We need the cycle has to go on. We need the resources for other benefits, and we also need the resources to make some of the things we use, whether in the circular or whether recycled. But the major problem, as my colleagues have mentioned, is about, we have the regulations, we have international as well as local policies, acts, and everything. It's about following up those regulations. Before any company comes to operate, they do an EIA, and then they put all the international standards, the ILO and everything to follow. And how they talk about also ensuring that the environment is not, there will be negative impacts, but there should be a balance, and recommendations are usually made as to how to make the place greener, how to make the environment, the people, the economy better. But that is usually not the case. But you have some companies that are sincere, but also our own local people, the governance issues. If they come with an agreement, we have stakeholders that represent. You have the paramount chiefs, you have the chiefdom authorities, you also have the district authorities, the provincial secretary, and you have the councillors, the members of parliament. All of these represent the people. And you also have landowner representatives, youth, women leaders, but it's about following up. You just have a few people getting all the benefits, and it's very little trickles down to the directly affected people. So this is the issue. So for me, Sierra Leone, even as I'm talking to you now, more forests are going. You go to, and these are national parks. These are protected areas whose role is to protect the fauna and the flora in their natural state, and to make sure that the resources are used in a sustainable manner. But maybe when you come to the city, the Western Area Peninsula National Park, it's almost gone. The number 2 river, people hear about number 2 river, you hear about Toke, you hear about all our nice beaches. They have gone up into the hill. And then in 2014, we even had a mudslide in our country. And there are other little mass wasting taking place in other areas because of this digging, either the illicit miners or the formal miners. So for me, 2058, maybe the next generation in the next 100 years, it is not like I have been to, I'm not so often, but I've been to the US. I studied also in Ireland. There is more green environments. There are more green environments than you can find here, even though we are in a almost a rain-fed zone. We have very high rainfall, and but people, this crave for mining and being in the city, I see it far-fetched. The poverty rate, you have less than you have more than 60% of people who live below, who get $1 a day. So for some people, this is the only way. They go to the bush, they cut down the trees, they mine, they do the mining, and when the companies come to help, sometimes the bigger ones, the politicians do not give opportunity to the people, even if the companies are committed to doing it. So it has to be all over, from the companies who come, our own government.
Yep.
Yes.
No, I just want to pick that point up and maybe
our government,
the others, because I think the question I was having is that made me think when you said that there is, and it's something that's come up a number of the presentations really, is does mining kind of resource extraction need a new social contract? Does it need a new kind of human purpose to take us to 2058? Because a lot of these issues, and it's been intimated before, are around ethics and equity. It's about how we balance up environmental justice and kind of human justice. So, but and Aminata spoke very eloquently and passionately about the reaction on the ground. So if we're going to be 2058, how does someone, I think it was Doris yesterday, said something about, mining, we should stop seeing mining as a revenue project and start seeing it as a development project. I mean, I wonder that might be another utopian thing, but Karen, I know that the BGS has a lot of stuff around sustainable development and seeing the geoscience in there. Can mining balance this up?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, and I agree with that sort of sentiment that we do need to see mining in a different way. That is at the core of this, I think, and we might actually, and this is sort of back to again the regulation and how we might deal with it on a societal and on a global level. that might mean that we need to look at business models for it as well. How does money flow in and out of those sectors? Because that is, in the end, sort of determining a lot of where we mine and how we mine, unfortunately. And it also determines a lot of the issues that we're faced with now of import dependencies and other sort of things that are related to the stocks and to the flows. So I think that we do need to think about mining in a new way. And I think I would like to see a little bit this social license to operate, while it's extremely important that we do that at a local level, of course, that we make sure that the people who are directly affected by a mining operation are benefiting from it. I do think that we need a license to operate on a more societal level, that we need people who aren't impacted directly by mining operations to start taking responsibility and start to take ownership of the fact that we're doing this. And I think in some regions it has tremendous impact, in other regions it has almost no impact. But again, like with everything else that we're doing that has to do with our resources, it will always have an impact. And until we have those difficult conversations, and I think there's been a lot of talk about biodiversity, and I think that's extremely relevant. But again, if we go back to the farming topic, how big an impact has farming had on biodiversity in pretty much all over the world? Huge impact on biodiversity. Again, maybe we haven't learned to manage it perfectly. Maybe there's still room for improvement there. But again, we have actually taken that discussion, and we are continuing to take that discussion and finding out how we do it. And you look at mining operations, for example, in Sweden, one of the mining regions that we do have in Europe, the area of mining that's being used for mining is smaller than the area being used for golf courses in Sweden, which has the biggest impact. I don't know. I mean, probably the mines and the biodiversity, I don't know. But again, we need to be honest and real about having these conversations, where I'm guessing what Aminata was getting at before, it's not like the number of golf courses. It's actually people's houses subsiding because people are stealing sand. So there are other problems that you need to deal with in that kind of environment. But I do think we need to take joint responsibility for that. We have to find out how to do that.
Maybe we should ban golf courses instead of that.
Imagine how much space we spend on parking lots.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, there was a point just that Steve Edwards from the IUCN mentioned that in terms of deforestation, I think mining is responsible for about 7 or 8%, and agriculture 30 to 35%. And Ken was making a similar point. Ortwin, just on that point about do we need a difference? Yeah, I'll come back to Adrian in just a second because there's one comment. But if you want to hold that thought on that one and come back to me,
absolutely.
I just wanted to continue the idea of the social contract, Ortwin. Do you think we need a new sense of purpose around mining that defines it in a different way? Oh, you're muted there.
Well, thank you very much for the question. And I like the word contract even more than license, because we can see there's a contract. First, a contract between mining and nature. I mean, that is very symbolic, but it has a strong communicational message, because you could say we take something from nature, which is basically all the minerals and things away, but we are responsible enough to recultivate it afterwards and to give it back to some kind of a natural stage that is also in line with biodiversity and other things. We have to make a contract with the people living in and around the site to get, the neighborhood being involved. Something like Annemita also made very clearly, this is a big point to have the neighborhood being part of it, getting ownership over it, but also having economic benefits, but also knowing that this is going to be a temporary thing, and then afterwards we'll have back into some kind of a more, let's say, pristine environment. And thirdly, there is a contract between countries. And we see some countries are much more exploited than others. And we can see that in the issue of equity between countries, mining can make a major difference, because a lot of mining operations are in developing countries. countries. And so in that sense, it could also be an instrument, a contract where we can see that developing countries can get, resources that they can use for other things that is absolutely necessary. And not all the resources are going either to the 5% richest people or to the companies back home. I mean, that's something that happens right now. And I think if we can get a better sharing there of the benefits, that also would make a major difference in the reputation. So the contract is something that shows I give something, but I get something. And and if you think of that kind of rationale, so you can say, you can put yourself into the field of nature and say, okay, nature gets something, but it also will receive something. It gives and receives. And I think that's it's so basic, I think, to human actions, that kind of metaphor, I think it's even better than the license metaphor, which I think is a little bit, I get a driver's license. This is something I can do something because I have the skills. The contract is something, it's a mutual thing.
Yeah, social license still is a community that grudgingly might accept it. It doesn't mean to say they embrace it and they welcome it.
Yeah.
I wonder if the social contract might work in an ecological sense. Is there an ecological opportunities for mining, or is it all negative? Someone earlier asked about these, surely any impact of mining is a negative impact on the environment. Adrian, sorry.
I jump in there. I was going to come up with a solution of what to do with the golf courses, but we'll hold that for. But I just quickly, one thing on the regulatory front. I mean, there's a rather interesting lesson to be learned from the deep sea mining story, I think, which is it is possible to bring people together to try to come up with international standards and international treaties to protect environments, and not just from an ecological and environmental side, but also from a social side. I mean, the Convention of the Law of the Sea, and the part of it which deals with the seabed resources, is actually, it's born. I was a bit of a Star Trek fan myself, more than Star Wars. It sounds something straight out of the sort of Federation future, where the wealth from this operation is redistributed. It's probably linked, almost to your 2058 vision of this sort of modern world, and part of that is a social contract that redistributes the wealth from those mining operations in some sort of royalty scheme. And of course, that part has kept the lawyers busy for a very long time, in the last 20 years of it, and to the degree that there is no deep sea mining, because none of those things have been agreed upon. And it's a fascinating model, and I don't know what else we would look to, for examples of that. But as to the ecological consequences, this is absolutely paramount. As I said, the protection of biodiversity is absolutely critical. You have to understand what impacts there are. I don't think there's any scenario where human does anything and there's not an impact. For me as a biodiversity scientist working in the deep sea, but also somebody who relies on all of the infrastructure of the modern world, and I live in a middle city surrounded by gadgets, I don't think I could just draw a box around my environment and say that should be untouched, whereas the rainforests of West Africa should be the ones that are mine. It just doesn't seem correct to even think of it in that way. It has to be a societal decision where we get all of the people in the room to make those things. And I think in the deep sea mining, it's been a really good example of where we need very strong advocates for the environment, but we need also strong human advocates in there as well, and people who have the knowledge of the system to be able to inform that debate. I only ever give one opinion of these things, which is that science is critical. We have to get the science right. You want a COVID vaccine, you need to get the science right. You want to solve climate change, you get the science right. That's the basic situation. You want to make mining green, we need to find the scientific data to make that happen and make it possible. And that's what I believe in.
There's a general, I'm going to conflate a couple of things here, just because we're really in the last kind of 5 minutes. We're all talking about mining in a fairly conventional sense, in the sense of digging stuff out of the ground for doing it. And Ian Morse points out that, are we missing something when we talk about mining and not recycling? The mining industry is forever growing. How can we shrink the need to mine in the first place? And I'd tag onto that the growth in urban mining, so generally increased recycling. And then there's a point that has come in more around from Joe, talking about billion EVs are not the answer. It's attitude change that we need around transport and things like that. Can we balance up this need about, how much do we really, really need to dig holes in the ground and mine, and how much can we get out of some of these other things that might be smarter ways to use the material we've got, the circular economy, or it could be behavioral change? And it's a tough one to end with, but maybe this balancing act, and to get into the last kind of 5 minutes, but maybe start with you, Karen, about where you see that balancing act between our responsibility to get stuff out the ground and society's responsibilities to do the best with it.
It's challenging because I can talk about this for like hours and I'm not allowed to. So very briefly, it's absolutely true. We need to, of course, look at the secondary resources. And actually one of the really important, I think, sustainable development goals is that we need responsible consumption. And I think that is sort of ingrained in that. What does that mean? Well, it means, of course, that we, one, shouldn't just consume things that we don't need to consume, but it also means that the things that we do feel we need to consume, we need to source responsibly. And that includes, of course, using secondary resources. And I think for some things, we're really good at this. And things like copper and aluminium and iron, we actually steal. We are recycling almost everything that is being decommissioned. We bring it back into the loop. The problem is that we actually have a growing demand on almost all of these metals. And especially we have a growing demand on the specialty metals that go into this green transition that we are so committed to wanting to see. And so there we have a hugely increasing demand. So the stock is not there for us to recycle. That's the first problem. And the second problem is actually that, yes, we can take the resources out of this one, but if it demands more energy to actually extract the metals from this than from a rock, which one should we actually choose? And for a lot of different metals and a lot of different stocks, that is actually one of the issues. But I do completely agree. We should view this as a rock. This is a rock, and this will have metals in it. And we should get much better at describing this resource, as we have for centuries learned how to describe rocks. We should be able to describe this in terms of its grade, the concentrations, the tonnage of it. We should become better at the collection and all of the things that go into that process, so that we can get on a trend of increasing supply from secondary sources. But with the predictions that we currently have and the technologies that we currently have, it has to be a mix of both.
So I just want to jump to Aminata very quickly. And from your perspective, is it a case of mining more or reducing demand?
I'm getting a technical hitch. Can you go right again, please?
So I can throw the question to Adrian instead then, and we'll come back to you when you if you get the chance. So Adrian, do we try and reduce demand within society, or are we compelled to mine more?
Goodness me, it was well outside of my expertise, but why not? I give my opinion. I just think I can't. That ship has already sailed, hasn't it? I mean, I think that we are already on plan A. From my understanding, industry around the world is transitioning to use these minerals. And I mean, perhaps, we need to revisit that argument. I don't know. It seems to me that those minerals are going to have to come from somewhere, and the expert ore geologists, of which there are probably hundreds in the conference, and I'm not one of them, have told us that recycling won't be sufficient. And I recycle everything, but I'm quite certain that what I recycle is not enough to buy me a Tesla next year, which is what I would love to have. But
so let's go to Aminata. Oh, sorry, Adrian, I cut across you there. No. Aminata, can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So the question really is about, from your perspective in Sierra Leone, I mean, is a big issue about us reducing our demand for the minerals, or should we be better at getting them out there? How important is recycling and demand reduction?
In my country, even recycling could be an issue, because we do recycling, especially aluminium and those old bottles. They do it a lot. But I think it's better for us to reduce the mining and teach the communities on how to develop the environment, how to make the environment greener. And if companies come, they have to make sure that they go through the process, the engagement process. It's very important. They inform all stakeholders when they go to communities, they should not just go to the paramount chiefs. They should make sure that they go to the project affected persons. They should go down to the grassroots. They go down to the communities that will be impacted. And as I said earlier, we cannot blame the companies also, because sometimes the companies give their own responsibility. They give their own amounts or to carry a particular project. It is about implementation. It is about commitment of those who are put in positions to ensure that there is a win-win situation.
Yeah.
So it's still very challenging in my country. But I would rather prefer maybe we go less mining for now and then educate the people on a greener environment.
Hello everyone, I'm Cristina Torrente, one of the science communicators at the Natural History Museum. We are having some technical issues with our host, Iain Stewart, but I think I can pick up the conversation until he comes back in. So let's see if we can have our speakers back. And Aminata, I'm gonna take it back to you. You were interrupted by the technical issues, so please, sorry about that, but please continue.
Just as I said earlier, it's about commitment also. But if you are to ask me, I would say we need to make sure that we engage all the stakeholders, the directly affected people, the communities that are affected, all the paramount chiefs. We come to the district level, regional, and then national level. And sometimes the companies, some companies are committed, but the people who are put in charge do not really allow the people to see the benefit. For instance, if the company dedicates 1 million trees, and if the people who are in charge only go and plant 200 trees, so you cannot blame the company. So we really need to ensure that the communities get their own benefits, because there is so much, little or no education in those villages, and health opportunities are so slim. You will have in black and white that there is free healthcare for everyone, or free education for everyone, but you still have a lot of children who go without education, who go without medical services. You still have thousands of women dying, especially in those remote villages. And so if what they depend on their resources, they depend on their streams, they depend on their farmlands. If companies come and take those assets from them, it's very challenging to see us joining the rest of the world by 2058, because it's not just about Sierra Leone. Because I've been to other African countries, we share similar challenges. So if, as it has been mentioned, that it has to be that we should all be connected globally. It is not just about attending conferences, but ensuring that this greenstone age is shared to all the communities, even in underdeveloped countries like Sierra Leone and the rest of the world.
So I think that one common point, that one very important point that's coming up in what you're talking about, also in the questions that people are asking on the chat, is that balance. Is how do we find that balance? And it seems a little bit that it's more nuanced than just a balance of two weights there. That what I've been getting from all the comments and every time that you were adding something to the conversation, is that it's not just a balance of two weights. There is more things in mind. There are more balance in the game. Now, one other thing that I think it will be interesting to close the conversation that Iain started, and I've got the lack to finish, is we've had the text that Iain read at the beginning. You expressed whether you thought that it was possible or not possible. We've had a very, very extensive conversation. We are really, really close to the end of this discussion, but can I ask you, or if you can very briefly, and to wrap everything up after the whole conversation, give us once again, do you think that could be reached by 2058? And very briefly, what do you think will be the main goals to achieve to actually get to that point? Audwin, should we start with you?
Yes, sure. Well, thank you very much, Christine. I think the first thing which is very important to reach the goal is to start tomorrow or even today. I think very often if you think about sustainability, we say, oh, we want to accomplish something in 2030, 40, 50. So we have 10 or 20 years to go. So we'll start then when it comes close. And then, of course, we'll fail. Because the way that we want to change is very substantive. And we need substantial changes. And that needs, I think, action from day one. So that's my first thing. The second thing is we need cooperation among the various actors and between the various institutional actors, but also individual actors. And what is said before is that we need the mining industry together with the regulators, together with civil societies, and together also with scientists to work on better programs so that we can make a good balance between not using material, so reducing demand, doing better recycling programs, to also having more long-living standards of material. I mean, you raised your phone, and after 2 years you get a new one. Why? It will work 5-7 years. So we have a lot of waste of material. At the same time, and that I think we also need to acknowledge, we need these kind of materials. And if you want to have the energy transformation done as we wanted it, we need more minerals and more metals than we need with coal and with other fossil fuel. And that's very clear. I mean, we need wind generators, and that's basically aluminum. And so we have a lot of materials that we need also for the all the transitions that we would like to have. So if this is a kind of what I said, and this is my last word, we need this kind of contract, a contract between nature and mining, between people and mining, and between countries and mining.
Thank you so much, Audwin. Aminata, do you want to add anything to that? What do you think? What do you think would be the main things
Yes.
to achieve that 2058?
Yes, we have to be committed, to be sincere, and if mining companies want to come, those who have the intention, because they normally have end of mine plans, they have their whatever to reclaim land. They should not just wait until they are finished. I think reclaiming the land should also be ongoing, or to buy a particular piece of land that they begin to make it look like we will be able to catch up. But to be very candid, my country and many, if not most, African and developing countries will not be able to reach that goal of 2058. We are still way behind. But I hope there will be more commitment from all the stakeholders to make our environment greener and to make mining beneficial, to make the people better off than they are. And then we will have a better world.
Thank you so much, Aminata, for that honest and realistic
You have
approach.
to change. Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Karen, what about your side? It's difficult when you had Aldwin and Aminata already, but anything to add to that, anything that you would like to push forward?
I can see here that Adrian actually needs to leave in just a couple of minutes, so I suggest Adrian goes first.
Yeah.
Okay, Adrian, would you like to go?
We've heard that poor Ian has had a power cut, so I hope that's why we've lost him. But hopefully not me next. But I'll be very quick. Can mining make the world a greener place? I don't know. I know the world needs to be a greener place. We have to get to there. Mining has to be one, part of that solution. We have to get the science right. We have to get critically the communication of that science right. And everyone has to have a say in it. People have to have the transparency and the openness that they need to be able to have a say in these important societal decisions.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Adrian. And Karen, last but not least.
Excellent. Well, it's always nice to go last because you said commitment, you said science, you said contract, you said all of the important stuff. So I have a couple of comments I want to make again about these things and about sort of circularity of things. One of the interesting things about us wanting to recycle more and design for the circular economy, design for recycling, is that we also want things to design to last for a long time. So if we want to design our phone so we keep it for 10 years instead of 2 years, then it's going to take 10 years before we can recycle as well. So those two things are actually sometimes pulling us in opposite direction, making it even harder. And then I am going to be I'm usually always the optimist in these kinds of fora, but I'm going to be a little bit pessimistic. I think it's going to be really tough to achieve that sort of perfect transition by 2058. And one of the reasons for that is that mining actually takes time. And one of the reasons that mining takes time, from we discover a mineral deposit, actually discovering it takes years. After we've actually discovered it and started to describe it, it still takes years and years before we get to the permitting process. And that has to do with the biodiversity, with the environmental impact, social impact. All those things need really, really good baselines, really, really good analysis, and we should not compromise on those. Perhaps we should even take them to a higher level, given this sort of more social contract. And so it takes a long time to actually establish metal and mineral production. It takes decades. So I am actually slightly pessimistic, but at the same time, I think we are headed in the right direction. And I think that while this fact that it takes so long is a hurdle, I still think that the biggest hurdle is really our commitment to it. So thank you for saying the commitment word, Aminata. I think that is how we will get there. If we all commit, and if our politicians commit, if our industry commits, and if people commit, then we could get close.
Brilliant. So you said pessimistic there, but I think you were being optimistic with within the being pessimistic.
How
So
can you be really pessimistic?
thank you so much. Now, sadly, we've run out of time for today, but I want to thank all our panelists, Owen, Aminasa, Karen, and Adrian for being here with us. Ian as well, even though he's disappeared, but as well, thank you, Ian. I'm going to say goodbye to you and hopefully see you in the future. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everyone, for watching and being there and asking the excellent questions that we've been sending to the panel, and also for the excellent discussion that you've been having on the chat. We are really, really happy that you've engaged in the topic and you've engaged with us and the panel. And we also really hope that you've enjoyed the discussion. Hopefully there will be more to come, because this is, as you can see, a very big topic. But it's time to say goodbye for now. Thank you so much to Iain Stewart for being there, and I'm afraid he had some technical issues, but he's done an amazing work. I'm going to say goodbye to all of you from his part as well, and I'm going to say goodbye to you as well. And as I said to our speaker, see you in the future. Bye. Thank you.